Eastern and Western philosophy. For obvious reason, there is the difference between Eastern and Western philosophies. Apart from geographical locations, these two parts of the world have differences in their way of life and the approach to the life in general. These ways of living are not only brought about by topography and physical circumstances that play crucial factor in living, but also the skill of thought that governs the major societies in the eastern and western part of the globe. Let's take a look first at what philosophy is in general and how it affects and makes differences on Western and Eastern society. Generally, philosophy is universally defined as the study of the wisdom or knowledge about the general problems, facts and situations and connected with human existence, values, regions, and generally reality. It seeks reasons, answers, and general explanations to life and its factors. Thus, if we talk about philosophy, we talk about the scale of thoughts, and if we connect it with our topic, it differs and comes with the realities, problems, and situations of certain people, like in this case the East and the West. Basically, Western philosophy is referred to as the school of thoughts from Greek philosophy and influenced the greater part of the Western civilization. In contrary, the Eastern philosophy is based mainly in Asia, more especially the Chinese philosophy. Moreover, Western philosophy takes its roots from Rome and Christianity, especially Judaism, Christianity. Eastern philosophy, on the other hand, is the form of Confucianism, Mahayana Buddhism, and Taoism. This is it. Safe to say that Eastern philosophy is classical Chinese, while Western philosophy is more Latin in its roots. The main difference between the school of thoughts or the philosophies of the East and the West are the West's individualism and East's collectivism. The Eastern philosophy is drawn much more into groups or society or people's actions and thoughts as one in order to find a meaning in life, as they try to get rid of the false me concept and find meanings in discovering the truth me in relation to everything around them, or is the part of a bigger scheme. In contrast, the Western civilization is more individualistic, trying to find the meaning of life here and now, with self at the center as it is already given and part of the divine. Let us take a deeper look into more of the aspects or problems or issues these two philosophies try to make sense of. The main principle of the Eastern philosophy is unity. This cosmological unity is the main point in the journey of life as it goes towards the eternal realities. Life is round and reconciliation with everything around it is important. Ethics is based on behavior Independence is more the inside to the outside. In order to be liberated in inner self, must be freed first in accordance to the world around it. Western philosophy, on the other hand, is based on self-dedication to be of the services to others. Life is service to God, money, community, and so on. Due to its Christian influence, there has to be a beginning and end to find a meaning. Linear as it says, Western philosophy is logical, scientific, and rational compared to the Eastern concept of eternal and recurring. Eastern philosophy also thrives on virtues. This would be explained with the selfless approaches to life, satisfaction with what one has is key. Meanwhile, Western philosophy focuses on ethics. As individuals, one must do what is supposed to be done without causing ill to others. Success is based on how much one walks his path without hurting others. Eastern philosophy is also more about the spiritual, while Western philosophy is more of hands-on style. The difference is the I of the West and the word we in the East, as one focuses on finding truth and meaning. This is pertinent to mention here. So far the Eastern and Western philosophy is concerned, we should quote Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan's philosophy or his concept. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan is one of the India's best and most influential 20th century scholars of comparative religion and philosophy. He is an eminent expositor and interpreter of Indian traditional philosophy, which carries with it the actual reflection of Indian culture. He is a philosopher, statesman, and a diplomat consistently at the same time. His basic philosophical position is an outcome of the synthesis between the East and the West traditions. Naturally, he combined the two traditions with perfect ease and is able to evolve a philosophy of synthesis. Radhakrishnan was born in an Orthodox Brahmin family at Tirutani, a small town near Madras, Chennai, India, 5th September 1888. His vocational career started in 1909 with service in Presidency College, Madras, as a lecturer in philosophy. 5 years later, in the year 1914, he was promoted as professor of the philosophy in the same college. In the year 1917, Radhakrishnan was transferred to the Arts College at Rajamundry as a lecturer in philosophy. Then he went to Mysore University as a professor of philosophy in the year 1918. At the request of the authorities of the newly established Mysore University, and he held his post for the period of 3 years. In Mysore the same year, he wrote the philosophy of Rabindranath Tagore during his short period of his stay in Mysore 1920, he celebrated the work, The Religion of the Religion in Contemporary Philosophy, that was published in the year 1921. He was appointed to the most important chair of philosophy in India. The King George V Chair of Mental and Moral Philosophy in the University of Calcutta. He was invited to Oxford in 1926 to give a term lecturer of Hindu view of life, and after that teaching and lecture assignments abroad followed one after another. During his period, he also founded the Indian Philosophical Congress in collaboration with other eminent men of philosophy in India. Radhakrishnan became the Vice Chancellor of Andhra University in 1931. He was the first spreading trust professor of Eastern religion and ethics at Oxford in 1936. In 1939, Radhakrishnan was appointed as the Vice Chancellor of the prestigious Banaras University. He was the elected Fellow of the British Academy in 1940. Radhakrishnan is one of the greatest figures of the Indian Renaissance. He has a place of eminence amongst the most important thinkers of the contemporary world of philosophy and creative thought. Contemporary Indian philosophy is greatly indebted to him for his contribution of immense scholarly work in the field of religious philosophy. He has contributed powerfully to the synthesis of the two hemispheres, East and the West. A man of very rare intellectual endowment, his fame rests securely on the contribution as the creative interpreter of the comprehensive religious and the philosophical traditions of India and the West. His early education made him familiar with the knowledge of the East, particularly of India, and his own scholarly adventure acquainted him with the wisdom of the West. But his fundamental convictions are deeply rooted in Indian traditions. His philosophy was grounded in Advaita Vedanta, reinterpreting this tradition for a contemporary understanding. He defended Hinduism amongst uninformed Western criticism, contributing to the formation of contemporary Hindu identity. He has consistently defended Hinduism against all criticism, which tended to describe it as a non-historical and negative. Since the discovery of Eastern philosophy by Western explorers and scholars in 18th and 19th century, there has been an arbitrary divisions maintained, especially in colleges and universities, between Western philosophy and Eastern philosophy, as though these two systems present radically different views of the world. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, in his book, Scholars of many nations and have written important books, but reading them, one fact has always attracted my notice. I have felt that prevailing accounts of the origin of philosophy and its divisions into different compartments do not give a full or true picture of the theme. There is therefore need for a more comprehensive account of the general history of philosophy. Some of the pages of this history have been lost in a manner which makes restoration impossible. The sources of the information about them are no longer accessible. It is known to us that Egypt and Iraq had developed a high degree of the civilization long before Greece. We also know that early Greek philosophy was deeply influenced by the ancient wisdom of Egypt. Plato in his writings refers to Egyptian maxims in a way which suggests that their authority as sources of knowledge was unquestioned. Aristotle went further and said that the Egyptian priests were the first philosophers of the world. But we do not know the details and of the relationships between Egypt and Greece. Not only are we ignorant of them, but we have little hope of ever recovering them. Similarly, we have no definite knowledge as to what was the nature and scope of the philosophical speculations that developed in the civilization of Babylon and Nineveh. Nor do we know whether these speculations were in any way responsible for the birth of Greek philosophy. This lacuna in the history of philosophy are due to gaps in our knowledge which forms the nature of the cases are not likely to be filled up. There are, however, certain other regions and of the ancient history of which we have fuller knowledge today. This enables us to draw a more accurate outline of the growth of philosophy. The increase in our knowledge and of ancient Indian history has opened to us a new sources of information about ancient philosophical developments. It has thus become possible to trace the rise of the philosophy to a period earlier than the Greek and determine the nature and scope of its development at that stage. We have, however, failed till now to pay adequate attention to these developments and still cling to the limited vision of the history of philosophy which has prevailed since 19th century. Further he wrote, European philosophy originated in the philosophical inquiries of Greece. Its progress was retarded after the spread of Christianity, and there was a stage when philosophy disappeared from the European scene. After a lapse of time, that is some centuries, the Arabs began the study of Greek philosophy in the 8th century AD. Later, through their agency and study, was revived in Europe. These studies in course of time led to that movement of enlightenment which is generally described as the European Renaissance. During this period, Europe secured direct access to the original Greek texts, which till now she had known only through the words of Arab translators and commentators. After the Renaissance began, the movement of thought to which we can trace the rise of the modern philosophy. That's why this is also pertinent to give the brief account of our ex-President of India, Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan. There is no division between the Eastern or Western philosophy when it comes to the most basic questions of what it means to be a human being. The fundamental purpose of the philosophy is to find the meaning in one's life and the purpose to one's path. And there is no major difference between Eastern and Western philosophy according to that understanding. Its similarities between Eastern and Western philosophy are greater than any difference cited by modern day writers and lecturers on this topic. The most often cited difference is that Western philosophy is fragmentary, while Eastern philosophy is holistic. The popular writer Shankara Sharanam, author of the book God Without Religion, is one example of this when he claims that Eastern philosophy is concerned with the general knowledge while Western philosophy aims at specific knowledge. This refers to the popular understanding that Eastern philosophy, especially Chinese philosophy, addresses the whole of human existence, and while Western philosophy, beginning with the Greek, only focuses on the certain aspects of the human condition. An example given by an academic scholar is how Confucius analysts deal with both the inner and outer life of the person, that is the holistic, while Aristotle's work emphasizes how one should conduct oneself to live well among others, fragmentary. Another Western philosopher like Plato emphasizes specific goal one should strive for in discovering what is true and real in life. There are arbitrary distinctions which totally miss the underlying and essentially identical aims of Eastern and Western philosophy. Although such distinctions distort one's perception of history in that once people accept a fundamental difference between East and West, they may tend to view the history of respective culture as radically different from each other. In fact, human beings are essentially the same the world over. Only the details of customs differ, and the philosophies of Eastern and Western thinkers make this quite clear. One could compare the fundamental ideas of the great Chinese philosopher Confucius, that is 551 BCE, with those of the Greek philosopher Aristotle, 384 BCE, and find they are presenting the same basic concepts. Both men believed that virtue was the highest goal one could strive for, and that lasting rewards come to a person who put virtue above worldly possessions. The Korean philosopher Owen 617 CE wrote, "Thinking makes good and bad." Meaning that if you think something is bad, then it is bad to you. The Greek philosopher Epictetus 50 CE said that same thing when he wrote, "It must not circumstances themselves that trouble people, but their judgments about those circumstances." The Epictetus says that one should not even fear death because one does not know whether death is a good or bad. One way would agree with that since he believed that everything was one, and the law of experience of the person as in life are just a part of the one experience of being a human being. The relativist philosophies of the Chinese sophist Deng Shi in 6th century BCE and the Greek sophists Protagoras 5th century BCE are almost identical. The criticism that Monty and Plato aim at different ends mentioned above is untenable in the both philosophers make it clear that one must concentrate on the improvement of the self before one tries to improve others. The best example, however, of the fundamental sameness of Eastern and Western thought is emphasized in the work of two of the best known philosophers from their respective hemispheres, that is Plato of the West and Wang Yangming of the East. While Plato is quite well known in the West, Wang Yangming is less so, even though he is as famous as Plato in China, Korea, Japan. Both of these philosophers have exerted an enormous influence through their works, and both argue for the existence of innate knowledge, that human beings are born knowing right from wrong and good from bad, and need only the encouraged to pursue goodness in order to live a fulfilling life. The work of both these men deal with what is good and what is the right way to understand one's experience. In this dialogue of Phaedrus, Plato forces the question, what is good and what is not good? Need we ask anyone to tell us these things? His mentor, Socrates, asked this question of his comrades Phaedrus regarding the quality of writing. In Plato's view, a person already knows what is good because that person will respond initially to the quality of the goodness in the writing and will also respond to the concept of the goodness in one's life. In the same way, when Wang Ming advocates for the supremacy of institution in moral matters, one would agree with Plato that anyone can recognize what is good and not good regarding morality. When some Plato's philosophies have been attacked by empiricists for lack of evidence. But what these two philosophers are contending makes sense on a very basic level. One must know what is good in order to pursue what is good. And this knowledge of the good must be innate in order for the people to have the desire to pursue it in the first place. Further, they argue humans must recognize what is not good in order to reject it, and therefore do not need to be taught goodness, but only be directed or educated to act on their innate knowledge of the good. The empiricists argument that there is a lack of evidences and for innate knowledge cannot be supported by the empirical fact. A person must be aware that they should pursue something before they can pursue it. One's theory of institution could be compared to one of the most basic human needs, that is, eating. No infant is ever taught that it should be hungry. And no child is ever instructed to making their need for the food known to adults. The infant tries to let an adult know that it must be fed, and the child verbalizes that same need in words or deeds such as saying, "I am hungry," or going to get something to eat. The recognition of hunger is an innate human quality which does not need to be taught. And when says the same is true in morality, all that must be taught is how to apply that innate knowledge appropriately in the same way that child is taught the appropriate way to ask for food. In Plato's manner, Socrates praises a slave who knows geometry although he has never been taught it. Plato uses the slave boy as an example of innate knowledge to show that people already know innately what they think of as being taught, and that this goes for the knowledge of the goodness as well as anything else. Just as a child knows when it is hungry, a person knows how to be the good. One in Plato would agrees that it prevents a person from acting on what they know is selfish desires which confuse people and make them choose to act badly even when they know they should not do it. Without that, now, if you want to compare between Eastern and Western philosophy, have you thought about the question? Is the world around us knowable? For most Westerns, the answer is positive. But if you ask a Chinese the same question, you would get the reply like, "I don't know." Does it matter? The reason behind it is the difference between Eastern and Western philosophy. A variety of philosophy schools around the world have pondered these kinds of philosophical problems for 1,000 years, and some of them are highly representative. Though they are confronted with the same question, the focal points are usually different from each other. Whether it is caused by the disparity of these opinions towards the importance of the philosophical problems, Western philosophy can be divided into ancient Greek philosophy, medieval philosophy, modern philosophy, and contemporary philosophy, while Eastern philosophy includes Chinese philosophy, Indian philosophy, Japanese philosophy, etc., etc. There is no similarities between them are obvious, yet the focus of Eastern philosophy is in society, whereas Western's is in universe. Because of understanding from the single side is always partial. The purpose of this episode is to illustrate the major differences between the focus and methodology of the Eastern and Western philosophy traditions and explain the possible causes behind it. When it comes to the philosophy, Eastern philosophers like an individual in a world as starting point and put the principles of the social life at the first place, while Western will speculate on it from the universal perspective and try to figure out the principles behind the world. As Fung, 1984, states that from an philosophical perspective, the highest achievement a man can realize is to be a sage, and daily task of dealing with social affairs in human relations is a part of the process of being a sage. However, for Western philosophers, they are inclined to put the origin of all things in the universe at first place, how the world works. As Windelband, 1956, illustrates, the history of Western philosophy is an insight into the origin of European science in general, which shows the reason behind Western philosophers' performance. This difference also appears in Eastern alone. Believe the core of philosophy is humanity, and society needs to be ordered by regulating people's social life. Similarly, Plato, who is a representative figure of the ancient Greek philosophy, also offered his political options, which is highly related to his theory of forms. As per Plato, and structure of the state is similar to the human body. The workers represents the abdomen, the warriors represents the chest, and the philosopher kings represents the head, which are corresponding to protective and governing respectively. It is noticeable to point out that while the Confucius political view is based on human nature, since they take individual citizen as the basic unit of the society, Platonism tries to analyze the structure of the state for a general perspective, which is focused on a general perspective. The difference between the methodology of the Eastern and Western philosophy is also a big concern. As Perkins concluded that the methodology is a system of the principles and general ways of organizing and structuring the theoretical and practical activity, and also theory of the system. Nonetheless, there is no concept like the methodology that appears the most Eastern philosophic classics. The fact is the methodology of Eastern and Western philosophy is extremely different from each other, and we can't use the definition of the Western philosophy to just the Eastern philosophy, and there will be a mistake. As the Easterns don't have system of the principles and the methods to solve the problem, they take the principles of the social life as a methodology, and which can be summarized as the doctrine of the means. And in contrast is Western philosophy has a set of theories of the reasonings and like the syllogisms and deductive reasonings, which can form the people's decisive mind habit. As Hamilton and the Webster says in their book about the culture difference in approaches can also be seen in the negotiations. In Western expects to focus on the contentious issues and try to achieve the most beneficial customs, beneficial outcomes and for themselves, and in contrast. Undoubtedly, some recent writers have realized the limitations of the old conceptions. Attempts are being made to produce in place of the old sectional histories of philosophy more adequate account. It cannot, however, be said that the old limited conceptions of the history of philosophy has been fully replaced by a new and more complete account. Nor can we say that the Oriental philosophy has secured in the general history of the philosophy the position it dissolves. The time has now come when with the material we already possess, we must attempt to write a comprehensive history in which the contribution of the East and the West will alike receive the proper recognition. It is with a view to providing a first outlet of such a comprehensive history that steps were taken to comply the present work. I will consider our labor justified if this endeavor draws the attention of the scholars to the need of the further studies for the fulfillment of that object. That's why the early sources of the philosophy, a basic question that arises in this connection is that of the beginnings of the philosophy. Where should we start the story? In Greece or in India? In other words, our country contains the traces of the earliest development of the philosophy. So far as Greek philosophy is concerned, we are aware of some of its earliest phases. It has been generally recognized that philosophical speculations in Greece cannot be traced earlier than the 6th century BC. The first Greek thinker whom we can appropriately describe as a philosopher was Thales. A specific incident has helped us to determine his chronology. It is said that he had predicted through his calculations of the correct time of eclipse which took place in 585 BC. Two men who after Thales gave a new turn to the development of philosophical thoughts in Greece were Pythagoras and Socrates. Pythagoras lived about 532 BC and the death of Socrates took place 399 BC. When, however, we look at India of the 6th century BC, we see a completely different picture. This period in India witnessed not the beginnings but the development of the philosophical thought. It was not a case of the dawn of philosophy as in Greece, but what may be described as the full glow of philosophical day. It was not the first fluttering steps of the human intellect along the long and arduous way of the philosophical quest, but it marked a stage which could have been reached only after a considerable journey. Two facts are inevitably forced upon our attention in any discussions of this period. That is, number one, the emergence of Buddhism and Jainism took place in this epoch. Before the advent of the Buddha and Mahavira, there had already been a considerable development of philosophical thought in India, and system had emerged to be the presupposed a long period of the wide and deep philosophical speculation. Gautama the Buddha occupies a peculiar place among the greatest men of the world. It is a debatable point whether we should place him in the category of prophets or the philosophers. In other words, what was the purport of his teaching? Was it a new revelation or was it a new philosophical discovery? In spite of long controversy, both philosophy and religion continue to want to repeat that controversy. But it seems clear to me that it is easier to see him in the role of a philosopher than in that of the prophet. He started on his inquiries in order to solve the problem of the life, not to search for the existence of God. Similarly, his quest ended with a solution of that problem and did not concern itself with either nature or the existence of the God. He broke away completely from that religious life of India which believed in gods and goddesses. He sought and found the conjunction of his quest without the intermediation and of the concept of God, the principle on which he based his speculative inquiries was itself philosophical. For him, the goal of human endeavors is to find the solutions of the problem of life, and this can be done without recourse to Deus ex machina. It is, of course, true that after his death, his followers soon transformed his teaching into a full-fledged religious cause. When they found that he had left unfilled the place normally assigned to God in religion, they placed the Buddha himself on the vacant throne of the deity. This was, however, a development for which the Buddha was not responsible. The Japanese prefers to discuss the areas of agreement with the expectation that harmony will lead to the resolution of details. In other words, as a result of putting high values of the social relationships, the methodology of the Eastern philosophy comes from predecessors' experiences and the pupil chronically Windelband cited Homer. The natural link of three great continents was the sea, with its islands, the coasts, occupied by the most gifted of the people, which formed the earliest historical time and settled all these coasts. As a result, most Western countries are highly commercialized and industrialized. Innovations and breakthrough are always greatly required, and which means always the theories based on logic and reasonings can be valued. As Confucius once said, wise move, the good stay still, the wise are happy, the good endure, though it is not his original meaning. This saying shows the difference between the personality of the ancient Chinese and the Greek from the geographical perspective. Let's move back to the question at the beginning, what I told earlier. Is the world around us knowable? The different answer towards it implied the real reasons behind the difference between East and the West, or Eastern and Western philosophy. And that is the way they look the world. While Easterns pay attention to the balance of the inner world, Westerns are trying to conquer the outside the world. This is why Westerns will say yes, and for the same question, Eastern will say don't know, or what's the use of it? Because most Easterns, they pay more attention to their daily life and back experiences, relationships with the earlier principles, sages, their sayings, their attitudes, their culture, their teaching, their lessons, which make them cannot respond to the question with a certain answer. Both the differences of the emphasis and the methodology can be explained from the perspective. To a great extent, the geographical factors contributed enormously to this process and sometimes make the gap grow. Eastern and Western philosophy need to learn from each other, as it is the only way to recognize the advantages and disadvantages of themselves. We all have the belief that the different philosophy will melt with each other rather than against in future. Thank you for the day. Thank you for the day. I believe the basic difference between Eastern and Western thoughts or the principles are very much clear. Okay? See you again.